My name is Ruth Ann Carter, and the day I checked my bank account, I stopped confusing love with permission. The numbers stared back at me cold and final. Available balance, $0. I blinked twice, thinking it was a mistake, but the screen didn't change. For a moment, I just sat there in my small kitchen in Decatur, Georgia, my tea growing cold on the counter. I had worked 35 years cleaning hotel rooms so that my son could live the life I never could. Every dollar in that account had a story behind it, a shift I didn't skip, a meal I didn't eat, a dream I postponed. I could have screamed, I could have broken something, but instead I filled the kettle again. Boiling water is still something I can control, and somewhere inside, beneath the shock, a strange calm began to form. 3 days later, my phone would ring, my son would be crying. The next morning, my neighbor Naomi Pierce knocked on my door, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Ruth, have you seen Mason's Instagram?" she asked. I shook my head, wiping my hands on a dish towel. She turned her phone toward me. There he was, my only son, standing in front of the Florence Cathedral, smiling wide. Beside him, his wife Kelsey and her mother Vicky clinked their glasses, sunlight bouncing off their jewelry. The caption read, "New beginnings, we deserve this." I felt my throat close. My entire life was staring back at me in that photo, the money, the sacrifice, the blind trust turned into someone else's vacation. Naomi kept talking, but I couldn't hear her anymore. That night, I sat alone in my living room. The old clock ticked like a slow heartbeat. I opened the photo again, watching the comments pile up beneath it, people calling them goals, power couple, living their best life. I wondered if anyone knew that trip was paid for by a woman who still reused tea bags and turned off lights to save on the bill. I didn't cry. My hands didn't shake. I just stared at the glow of my phone and whispered to no one. They toasted with my retirement. Then I set the phone down, took a deep breath, and quietly started a clock of my own. The next morning, I sat down with my notebook, the same one I used to track grocery lists and medication refills. I began writing what I remembered about my accounts, the last balance before the zero, the day I withdrew for house repairs, the date I gave Mason temporary access to help me set up online banking. Every line brought another memory, another quiet mistake. The statements had stopped arriving months ago. Mason told me the bank had gone paperless, that he would handle it so I wouldn't be confused by all the digital stuff. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. I pulled out the one paper receipt I still had and looked at the numbers, the way the commas and decimals lined up. I wasn't great with technology, but I had cleaned hotel rooms long enough to know when something was missing. A pillow, a towel, a lamp. I always noticed. And now, looking at my own life, I could see exactly what had been taken. Not just the money, but the faith that someone I raised would protect me when I grew old. Whoever did this forgot something important. I count things for a living, and I was ready to start counting again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the edge of my bed and thought about how long it had taken me to build that account. 35 years of working as a hotel housekeeper, folding sheets until my knuckles swelled, scrubbing bathroom tiles until my knees ached. Every Christmas I worked double shifts so that Mason could have new sneakers or a warm jacket. I skipped birthday cakes, family trips, and new clothes, all for one reason: to give him a life that didn't smell like bleach and sweat. When Mason got into college, I sold my mother's wedding ring to pay the enrollment fee. "It's just metal," I told myself, but I cried when I handed it over. That ring had survived 3 generations. I told him, "Don't pay me back, son. Just make something good out of it." He did graduate, found a job in finance, and I was so proud. I used to tell my coworkers, "My boy wears suits now." I never noticed how the distance between us grew each time he got a raise. I didn't save for vacations or comfort. I saved for peace. Every dollar was supposed to mean freedom from worry in my old age, and now it was gone, vanished with a click I never made. But I reminded myself, I've cleaned worse messes than this. If I could scrub out a stranger's dirt for decades, I could find a way to clean up my own story. It didn't happen overnight. The distance between us began like a slow leak, one that no one bothers to fix until the floor gives way. At first, Kelsey was polite. She called me Miss Ruth, always with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. When they got married, she asked if I could stay at a motel during the wedding week, because the guest rooms were already full. I told her it was fine. I'd slept on worse floors. Then came the small exclusions. "We're keeping Thanksgiving small this year. It's just close friends, not family. The baby shower is more of a brunch thing, you'd be bored." Her mother, Vicky, was worse. She'd glance around my house like she was touring a charity project. "This neighborhood has so much potential," she'd say. "You should really think about selling before it loses value." Mason didn't defend me. He just looked away, embarrassed, like my existence ruined his image of success. Once when I tried to talk to him, he said quietly, "Mom, you just don't get how things work now." I wanted to remind him that the only reason he had a now was because I'd survived so many thens, but I said nothing. It wasn't one betrayal that broke me. It was 1,000 little paper cuts, each hidden behind a smile. The next morning, I took a slow walk to Naomi Pierce's house. She'd been my neighbor for 20 years, a retired accountant with sharp eyes and a softer heart. When I told her what happened, she didn't gasp or pity me. She got up, poured coffee, and said, "Let's look at your records." We spent hours at her kitchen table, the smell of cinnamon rolls mixing with the sound of typing. Naomi showed me how to log into the online portal I didn't know existed. There they were: withdrawals, transfers, and authorizations I never made. Thousands gone, all signed under my name. "That's not your handwriting," she said, pointing to the digital form. "It's been copied. Poorly." She wrote down times, dates, and amounts, then folded the paper carefully. "You need someone who knows the law. Harold Benton still lives downtown, right?" Harold had been my high school sweetheart before life took us in different directions. Now he was a retired lawyer who volunteered at a community center. When I told him what happened, he adjusted his glasses, studied the papers, and said quietly, "This isn't just theft, Ruth. It's elder financial abuse. You have grounds to act." I felt something shift inside me, not anger but focus. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't the cleaning lady or the tired mother. I was a woman collecting evidence. Harold smiled faintly. "We don't shout, Ruth, we document." A week later, I went to my regular checkup at the clinic. Dr. Amira Patel had been my physician for years, and I could tell by her face that something wasn't right. She closed the door, sat down, and folded her hands gently. "Ruth," she said, "we got your test results back. I'm afraid the cancer has returned. It's advanced this time." For a moment I didn't hear her. The words floated somewhere above my head. When they finally settled, I nodded. "How long?" I asked. 6 months, maybe less, depending on how your body responds. We can try chemotherapy, but it's harsh. Expensive. It might not add much time." I looked at the ceiling and took a breath. Will it make me live longer or just die slower? Dr. Patel didn't answer. I stood, adjusting my coat. "Then no, I've spent my whole life cleaning up after other people. I won't spend what's left cleaning up after cancer." As I walked out, I whispered to myself, 6 months is enough. Enough to finish what I started. The next morning, I met Harold at the courthouse downtown. The air smelled like rain and old paper. We filed a preemptive complaint under the Elder Financial Protection Clause, attaching every document Naomi and I had printed. Harold explained each form slowly, making sure I understood. "Once the report is in," he said, "the bank can freeze the accounts tied to your name while they investigate. That'll stop any more withdrawals." We spent hours signing affidavits, photocopying pages, and stamping envelopes. Each thud of the stamp felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. When we finished, Harold looked at me over his glasses. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? It'll expose him, it'll hurt." I nodded. He already hurt me. Now I'm just cleaning up the mess. That evening, Naomi came by with a small meal, chicken soup and cornbread. "You did the right thing," she said, handing me the bowl. I didn't feel heroic. I felt steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to what life threw at me, I was steering it. I wrote in my notebook before bed, "We sharpen pencils, not knives. Justice can whisper and still be heard." Then I turned off the light, knowing the next move was no longer mine alone. The law would take it from here. Thousands of miles away, in Florence, Italy, my son was sipping wine on a rooftop terrace, thinking his problems were over. From the photos, it looked perfect: sunlight spilling over ancient tiles, Kelsey laughing beside him, and her mother Vicky filming every toast for social media. But even the prettiest views can't hide a crack when it starts to spread. Late one evening, Mason came out of the shower and heard voices on the balcony. Kelsey's tone was sharp, low, the kind she used when she forgot to fake sweetness. "Yes, it's done," she said into her phone. "The money's already here. Once we transfer it to Spain, I'm gone. He thinks we're partners. Poor fool." Vicky chuckled in the background. "He's slow, just like his mother, always believing people." Mason froze. For a long minute, the only sound was the hum of Vic below and the clink of their glasses. He didn't confront them. He just stood there, towel in hand, staring at the doorframe as if seeing his whole life collapse inside it. When he finally lay down beside Kelsey, who pretended to sleep, he stared at the ceiling, his stomach twisting. The wine suddenly tasted like guilt. He had taken everything from me, and now someone was taking everything from him. 2 days later, Mason's picture-perfect vacation began to crumble. It started small: a declined payment at a cafe, the waiter frowning politely as the card machine beeped. Mason blamed it on bad Wi-Fi, tried again, and failed again. At the hotel, the manager asked him to stop by the front desk. "Sir, there's been a hold placed on your account." Something about suspicious activity. Mason's palms went cold. He checked his phone. Emails from the bank flooded his inbox. Words like fraud alert, temporary freeze, and investigation jumped out at him like flashing lights. He turned to Kelsey, his voice shaking. "Did you move something?" She frowned. "Don't blame me, Mason. You're the one who stole from your mother." Her voice carried across the lobby. Vicky folded her arms, whispering loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We should have known better than to trust a man raised in a shack." People stared. Mason's face burned. He spent that night alone on the hotel balcony, staring down at the city he no longer belonged to. The sound of laughter drifted up from the streets below, but none of it reached him. Somewhere back in Georgia, I sat in my kitchen, sipping tea. My phone buzzed a notification from the bank. Account activity frozen. I smiled. Justice had started moving quietly, just as I planned. A week later, Harold called me early in the morning. "They've contacted the U.S. consulate in Florence," he said. "Mason has to appear to verify his identity and sign separation from your accounts. They'll let him go afterward, but the documents will make your case ironclad." I hesitated. "Can I be there?" He paused. "It's not required, but I can make it happen." 3 days later, I stood in a small white waiting room at the consulate, my gray sweater folded neatly over my shoulders. My hair had thinned, but my posture was straight. When Mason walked in, his eyes widened like a child seeing a ghost. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to watch you sign," I said softly. "Not as your mother, but as a witness." Kelsey rolled her eyes, chewing gum. "How sweet. The old lady came for her farewell tour." I turned toward her, not angry, just tired. "You took what wasn't yours, dear. But I taught him something: you'll never understand how to look someone in the eye after betraying them." The official entered, papers in hand. Mason's fingers trembled as he signed each page. When he finished, I handed him a yellow envelope. Inside were his childhood photos, and on top, a short letter in my handwriting. "You were my life," I told him quietly, "but I was never yours. Today I accept that." He said nothing. Tears filled his eyes, but I didn't stay to see them fall. I walked out into the Florence sun, feeling lighter than I had in years. When I returned home to Decatur, the air felt different, lighter, though the summer heat pressed against my skin. Naomi met me at the door with a hug and a casserole dish. "You did it," she whispered. "It's over now." But it wasn't over. News travels fast in a small neighborhood. People started whispering about the story of the mother who took her son to justice. Some called me brave, others cruel. I didn't correct them. Truth doesn't need defending. Online, the clip from the consulate had spread: a stranger's cell phone recording of me standing across from my son. The comments rolled in by the hundreds. "That mother is a legend. That's how you teach respect. Dignity doesn't age." I didn't read them for long. I had no interest in fame, only peace. At night, I sat on my porch with a cup of chamomile tea, listening to the crickets. The house was quiet, steady, and mine again. For the first time in months, I slept without locking the front door twice. Somewhere across the ocean, Mason faced investigators, lawyers, and headlines. He would learn that every false signature leaves a scar. I didn't hate him. I simply chose to stop carrying him. Because sometimes the loudest part of justice is just the paperwork and the silence that follows. Weeks passed before I saw any sign of him again. One morning, as the sun rose over the rooftops, I found a small white paper bag on my porch. Inside were 2 glazed donuts, his favorite kind, from the bakery near the old bus stop. No note, no name, just the quiet apology of someone who didn't know how to begin. The next day, there was a small bunch of daisies. Then a week later, a folded piece of paper that read only, "I'm sorry, Mom." The handwriting was shaky, uneven, like the way he used to write when he first learned to hold a pencil. I never answered. I didn't open the door. I just watched from the window hidden behind the curtains, as he left something and walked away without looking back. Naomi saw the pattern too. He's trying, she said. I know, I replied softly, but remorse has its own clock. It runs slower than forgiveness. Every gesture was a whisper, every visit a confession without words. I didn't need to punish him anymore. Life was doing that for me. Sometimes healing doesn't happen with hugs. Sometimes it happens with distance and the courage to let someone sit in their own silence. One quiet evening when the air smelled like rain and honeysuckle, I opened my red notebook for the last time. My hands trembled, but my heart was calm. I began to write. My son, love is not something you demand, it is something you give. If you've learned that, then you are no longer lost. I don't look for me when I'm gone. You'll find me in every act of kindness you choose, in every mistake you refuse to repeat. If you want to forgive yourself, start by forgiving others. That will be my redemption. I signed it with my full name, Ruth Ann Carter, and placed it in an envelope marked simply, for Mason. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows. The neighbors found me sitting peacefully in my chair, the red notebook on my lap, a small smile still on my face. No drama, no tears, just quiet completion. When the neighbors gathered for my wake, they filled the house with wildflowers from the park, soft music, and stories instead of tears. Naomi read the letter aloud, her voice steady, and even Harold wiped his eyes. Mason arrived hours later, alone. He didn't speak to anyone. He just knelt beside the chair where I had taken my last breath and pressed a photo to his chest, the one of him as a little boy, grinning with a missing tooth. He stayed in the house after that. No new furniture, no noise, just a man learning to live with what he'd done. The porch stayed swept, the flowers watered, and the red notebook rested on the shelf. If you're listening to this story, take one lesson with you: justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and that whisper is called peace. If this story found you, maybe it's because you needed to hear it. Maybe someone out there has taken more than your money, your trust, your time, or your peace. I hope Ruth Ann's story reminds you that quiet strength can still move mountains, and that protecting yourself is not cruelty, it's wisdom. We all have moments when we must choose between shouting and standing tall in silence. Choose the kind of silence that builds, not the kind that breaks. If Ruth's story touched your heart, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs courage today, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far her voice travels. And remember, justice doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it's born from love that refuses to be used again.